Hi, this is Stan. Welcome back to part 5 of our Lakeside slot car track build. Well, if there's a theme for this episode, it would be using up the scraps. I've got leftover pieces of MDF, and you can see in the background there I've got a bunch of leftover small pieces of 2x4s, and I've got a plan for all of that stuff. But first, the MDF. What we have to do is create a driver station so that the race drivers can plug in their controllers and get themselves positioned to race. So let's get started. It's going to be about 4 feet long by about 8 inches deep. And what I want to do is follow the curve of that track on the inside curve rather than just make it a straight rectangle. So something different. Anyway, I've got this 1/2 inch MDF, and what I'm going to do is just glue the pieces together, put a little bead of tight bond, and let that glue set up. But then for the curve place, I'm going to have to cut that with a saber saw, and I want to put a little ridge or a little fence on the front of it in case we set things down on there. I don't want them sliding off. Just a little bit of barrier, and that I'm going to have to take a straight piece of wood. I'm going to have to rip a little poplar probably and bend that into conformity of that arc. So let's take a look at that. And here we are making something that wants to be straight into something that's bent. I'm going to let this sit overnight. So this has been glued and clamped up overnight. I don't have a steamer for the wood, but I did wet it down a little bit. But let's see if everything held together. So far, so good. So you can see this is just an MDF partial box. It's open in the back and open on the bottom, but the sides, the front and the top are all covered in the same 1/2 inch MDF that was used on the table. And then overnight I put a little barrier on here to kind of keep things from falling off. So it's basically just glued and 18 gauge braided together, dried overnight. So I'm going to take the router right now, and I'm just going to do a little round over on a couple of these edges. And of course, we got to add some sandpaper to the process. Alright, a little hand sanding to kind of finish it off. Let me vacuum some of the dust off, and let's take it inside and see what it looks like. And here's the driver's station. I made it kind of a floating design. It looks like it's disconnected, but it's actually cantilevered off the framework on the table, and it follows the curve of the track. I think this is a great height. Someone can sit in a normal chair, plug in their controller, and run some cars, or operate the track by standing up. Next on the to-do list, we got to get busy and see if we can fabricate some crash walls going around the outside of the track. So last night, before I went to bed, I fitted and glued up a section of MDF that goes on the inside of this tight turn on the S's. Here you can see it without the clamps. So when I originally cut the
outside profile of the track, I wanted this turn to come in pretty tight to make this a tight turn for the position of the lanes that I wanted. However, by putting the wall on the outside, that's a pretty tight turn even for the 1/8 inch hardboard that I have. So this little filler here is just going to make an easier turn for the wall, and I'm going to get some Bondo mixed up and smooth this all out. Well, while waiting for that Bondo to set up, let's go out into the shop and the driveway. We've got to cut some 5.5 inch strips by about 8 foot long each. I need a half a dozen of them or so from the 1/8 inch hardboard. So let's get going on that.
And there's our stack of 6, 5.5 inches by 8 feet.
Now that we have our panels ripped, it's time to look into our bone pile here. I've got a bunch of these scraps, this pile, and I got a whole nother pile. I'm going to use the leftover 2x4s and 2x3s to create some small screwing blocks that we can attach to the bottom of the track for mounting the walls around the outside. So we'll trim off a small chunk. So when I mount this, I don't want to use the end grain to screw the panels in. I want the side grain, and I want it to be a nice true 90 so that the side walls are straight. In the sections of the track where it's a curve, I'm going to mark that arc, and we're going to head over to the bandsaw and just trim that arc. There we go, it accurately follows the curve on the track. So we got about 1 million of these to make. Let's get busy. All right, all the blocks are glued in all the way around the track. And here's just a little bit of a preview as to what the crash wall will look like. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Next time, on part 6, we're going to start on the wiring for lighting up the track. So I hope you can join me then.